All right, here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are recording. For
Okay.
those of us who were trying to join us live, I think if you're on the within the Gray Paper website, you'll be able to join us still. But YouTube Live, apologies. My computer's, I can feel the heat from where I'm sitting. It's probably time to upgrade. But Karen, welcome back. Good to have you. This is the Gray Paper Pod. I'm Mike Carlson from Gray Paper Legal.
And I'm Karen Westwood, Director of the Hennepin County Law Library.
And we don't have our recording up from last week's event yet, but we last week we were live at the Minnesota Association of Law Librarians, and that was a good time. We did our live event there, and we just did this presentation, but there are a lot of other very interesting presentations from Damien and the diversity panel and other folks. I just wanted to get your thoughts about what some of the key interesting items were for you at that event last week.
Well, this was the association's annual spring meeting, and it hasn't been live since pre-pandemic. So I think the association has had a couple of meetings live, but this is the first time for our all-day spring conference that we were all together. So just on kind of an interpersonal level, it was really nice to see people live, to be on the University of Minnesota campus. I don't get over to that law school often at all. At the end of the day, we had a little mini tour of the special collections rare book area of the law school, which is always super fascinating. Just a reminder of how the work we do, legal research and trying to find and understand the law, goes way back. And you just really feel tied to, a noble profession when you do a tour like that. But so at the end of the day, after our little deal at the beginning of the day, we started with Damien Real talking about moving into the future with these SALI standards and artificial intelligence and all of that. So it was a great kind of a way to bookend the day, I thought.
Yeah, it is. I did enjoy that tour as well. I hadn't expected to enjoy that as much as I did, but it is fascinating to see like the old yearbooks, right? The very first, the precursor to our reporter system, all of these old abridgments from the 13th century. It's super interesting that the common law tradition goes way back, and we sit in this digital world now, and it's interesting to see how similar the challenges are.
Right. And of course, Ryan Greenwood, the archivist at the law library, just is so great at introducing folks to that collection and highlights of the collection. Really, that was a great little tour.
Yeah, it's nice. And you have access to the collections. You can go back and look at not just the museum events, right? You're not just looking through the glass. You can get in there and touch. So that's kind of a cool cool event. I thought well, any other takeaways? There were some interesting, not newsworthy items, but there was some interesting conversations, I thought, especially in Damien's presentation on the SALI standards. For folks who don't, maybe I should share my screen. I think maybe most folks now are familiar with the SALI standards. I'll bring that up on the SALI LMSS.
Yeah, I thought that was a great explanation. When we have talked about SALI standards before, I think of them as, I guess the term is a taxonomy, similar to the Library of Congress subject headings, because I'm a librarian. So I think in those terms, you have this kind of scheme of how you're going to classify information, and it's very hierarchical. You have broad subject headings and subheadings within that. Similar, I think, to the way the key number system is arranged. You start with broad headings, and then you have these hierarchical things coming in below. And as Damien was explaining, SALI, you have these subject headings that can relate up and down to each other, but also relate across to each other. I'm not explaining it as well as he did. If that's recorded, that's definitely worth
Yeah,
looking at,
taking a
just
look at.
that section of how the terms relate to each other, which seems like kind of a breakthrough to me.
Yeah, I think, and I was sort of asking him at that presentation. I don't know if he addressed it or not. Just the difference between a taxonomy and an ontology. So if a taxonomy is that sort of hierarchical table of
Right.
contents type of view of a subject matter, an ontology is more of a networked view of it. And I wonder if I have a view of, let me just
Yeah, he had a great slide that kind of showed
yeah,
how a legal concept can relate up and down to other legal concepts, but also kind of across.
I haven't been in here in a little while. I should
Yeah.
but
So he
you
talked
can
about
see,
area of law, but also like procedural steps, and so and how those interact. Which I think lawyers and researchers kind of internalize those relationships in some way, but it was really interesting to see that diagrammed out.
Interesting to see how they've incorporated the large language models, how quickly they were able within an afternoon to translate the descriptions for these identifiers into multiple language, in an afternoon, not in,
Yeah,
months or
right.
years of work.
Yeah. Over the years, as we've established in our weekly sessions, I'm old. And I've seen kind of futurist speakers over the years, and I think you have to be a certain personality or type of person to go there. And Damien has it in spades. He's a really charismatic speaker. He's very much a forward thinker. And so it's fun to watch that. And then I'm kind of the old dog who's like, nah, I buy some of it. But of course he has to like project kind of the ideal future picture. And I guess I'm convinced we're in that direction. Maybe not arriving there quite as soon as Damien was implying.
Anticipating, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there were a couple of someone had asked him about ChatGPT in particular, and the future of secondary sources, and his thought was they're over, right? We were
Okay,
chatting.
boomer.
Yeah, I know. We were talking about the value of just like law reviews and how, like, sure, I want a law review, and he said he kind of made the same point as that you made. That top third of a law review document is to get an overview of that area of law when it's something you're just not directly familiar with. And of course, right? I mean, that's what we use secondary sources for. They're written for the reputation of the author, typically, right? I think, the treatise is a labor of love for the scholar, and provides all the relevant case law in a particular subject matter. But why do that if the language models effectively produce that for you? And I think that makes sense to me as a place that we're at right now, or very, very close to, or within the next few months. I don't know what the incentive is for a scholar to draft this much of shelf space of a treatise on a particular matter when the language models might be able to do that for you. But
yeah, I think if the language models become more trustworthy, right? And they sure seem to be moving in that direction. I mean, he kind of made the same point about associate attorneys as he did about secondary materials, which is, right. Their usefulness is up for question right now.
It is. It's going to be a different role for them. But I think, I mean, and for folks who aren't familiar with the taxonomy, it is being adopted by a wide variety of Thomson Reuters, all the publishers, all the vendors are are using it. iManage was mentioned specifically, but he's got a slide that's just full of all of the logos of the well-known vendors who are adopting the system. In addition to ChatGPT, these taxonomies are working together to ensure that you can use language models, and that the vendors who are working together can integrate with one another by adopting this common taxonomy or ontology or whatever you call it. So one thing that was interesting to me is that he said, I should have looked it up before we started recording, but as I was struggling with Excel before before we started this morning, was the competency standards for attorneys had been included in here, and I didn't get a chance to review or ask him where those came from, but they are working, Damien told me, with lawclerk.legal, which is a freelancer website for attorneys. And it makes sense that the competency codes would be on both ends for the attorney, right? The language model should be able to extract from my resume and my work product the Sally codes that can be then used to identify prospective jobs, or for prospective or for the employers, for the attorneys who are hiring on Law Clerk, to be able to identify prospective workers, freelancers. Because lawclerk.legal is adopting the Sally standards and the language models are there, that seems like a perfect integration for this new set of codes that they've just added to the Sally standards. So eager to share those. I want to identify those and just share those with colleagues and see what folks think. We've talked about the McCrate report on here before, and its progeny and all the skills an attorney is supposed to have in order to perform. And so it's interesting to see that was integrated into the Sally standards. When we were at the Bar Association, we talked about building a job site which would include some kind of coding. The Sally standards I was not even aware of the Sally standards. They might have been available then, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But at the Bar Association, we fantasized about a job site that would be coded for the core competencies, and both on the attorney side and on the hiring side, on the firm side, so we can make better matches and demonstrate how a new attorney might be able to grow, right? Which CLEs might you need in order to grow into the competency where you want to for those jobs that you'd like to have. So I was quite excited by that piece in particular. And it was just kind of a one-off mention of those codes. So I'm eager to share those with colleagues and to see if Allison Carroll over at Northwestern might comment on those. Anyway, that was one thing that was in particular exciting for me.
Yeah, it was good. Good conference.
What else anything else that was particularly stood out for you other than the loss of secondary sources?
No, it was good. Yeah.
Tell me, Karen, what was your most interesting legal research question of the week?
Well, I don't know if I've talked about this, Mike, but Hennepin County Law Library has started a program with the Hennepin County Public Safety Facility, what we know of as the jail. Have I talked about this before?
Oh, yeah.
So we've answered letters for many years. Now we've started going over to visit folks in the jail. And I was over just this week. I had a large group. A couple of really interesting questions came up. But one question that came up, and I was wondering what your approach to new legislation is. So this guy was saying, hey, I'm reading and hearing about new marijuana legislation going into effect. My public defender requested to push my case being heard out until after August 1st. And I said, oh, are you in on a marijuana charge? And he said, specifically, the police officer used the pretext of, well, I don't know if it's a pretext, said that he could smell marijuana and
Yeah.
then search the car. And he's like, so is that I smelled marijuana now going to not be considered a reason for searching the car? And I was like, man, here's the deal. When marijuana goes into effect, it's kind of tricky to figure out. I mean, yeah, I was just like, I don't know, we're gonna have to look at it, but what do you do? Like, do you have a favorite way to figure out what happens around that juncture of a new law going into effect? You know, I always look at the effective date of the new statute, and then you have to read the text to see if any part of it is retroactive. But do you have any other tips on interpreting new legislation?
There are, well, there's the general rule for when a new bill takes effect. And I always forget, you can do that as a prompt in Westlaw still, I think. I wonder if I can remember it. Do you happen to recall what that prompt is?
I don't know. I
in
do know you
Westlaw?
have to dig through effective dates in bills, and if there's no effective date given, I think it's August 1st. And then sometimes, of course, there'll be an effective date for a particular portion of the act, and then the rest of it just, oh, nice.
I don't know
This-
if that's
that's
correct.
it.
It looks like it's loading results. There is a prompt. I cannot remember what it is. I wonder if it's still effective in these new tools. This is going back, but there used to be a
Right.
page for every state. Westlaw had a page for every state that just outlined the rules for effective dates. And but as you say, this one in particular was, if I don't know if I caught a news article on it, but effective in August. And I
think
thought about
so,
this
yeah.
page. Yeah. Otherwise, bill tracking is, in looking for new legislation, I will set up just an alert in or what's now called notifications on Westlaw
Yeah.
for key terms in bill text databases or a
Sometimes I
key
found
site
that-
alert.
Yeah. Sometimes I found that a news search or just a general search about new legislation gives you a nice summary of it, and then you're kind of armed with what you're looking for within the text itself of the proposed legislation. Because otherwise, you find yourself just slogging through so much, trying to figure things out. But I found a summary. It used to be that the Minnesota House and Senate, I think, published in print these sort of session roundups of what legislation passed and what the effect is and so forth. But it's interesting. The whole effective date question is a big legal research question. I was on the elevator with the court administrator from the 4th Judicial District just yesterday. She said, hey, the court will be closed on Juneteenth. And I said, well, yeah, I thought that was the case. She said, no, the legislation making that a state holiday passed early in the session, but they didn't include an effective date. And so
Really?
without that, it would go into August 1st and miss Juneteenth for this year. So apparently some amendment went through, late in the session, and they will indeed be closed on Juneteenth. But just another reminder about how effective dates are important.
I know there's a prompt for it. I don't remember it. I haven't used it in so long. But there used to be a find. There used to be a citation for that Westlaw document.
Right.
Oh, that's going to drive me crazy. I'll try to post it on the website. Yeah.
We'll highlight it.
But we'll drop it in. I did that not so long ago. I found it. I don't remember it. Effective date, is usually referenced in the bill, of course. I mean that it's
right.
And then the as you say, the retroactive effect, that's a common just case law or research question quite often, is whether or not it applies retroactively.
Yeah,
Usually you're on the, it's and I think actually, it's not my area of law, but I think it matters where it's prohibitive. There's some language around, like in this case, it's increasing a liberty, right? It's not punitive. It's
right.
so, and I think that matters as to whether but there's terminology around that, which I don't
Right.
recall right off the top of my head, which would be impactful for your research.
Right. Well, yeah, the retroactivity of legislation is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. What was your most interesting research question, Mike?
I had so this week I had a little work to do, just doing some due diligence research on nonprofits.
Mm,
Uh, and I've done this with for-profit corporations quite a bit, and it just involves litigation profile, typically, what dockets are available, referencing that particular corporation, news articles. There's often a negative news search that will run, although I usually don't do negative news. I just do a news search, because if you're in the news, why are you in the news? Could be good news, I guess. It could be a puff piece, but news searches. So I did jump into ProQuest and some of the resources that we always celebrate at the Hennepin County Library. Just a basic case law research. But with the nonprofit, I haven't done many nonprofits. And I'm familiar with like GuideStar, and
right.
the great thing about nonprofits is that their 990s are made public, so their tax filings are available for anyone to view using the GuideStar service, or you can also run the search at the IRS website.
Right.
So it was just kind of an interesting new place for me to search, because I typically don't do a lot of research on
Yeah.
nonprofit organizations. The
think
challenging
there is
piece
a-
is that, what is the deal with the 990s being? Well, I mean, I think the most recent 990s that are available are like from 2019, so
why
they're
so late?
dated.
Yeah, I don't know. I do know that nonprofits are supposed to file an annual report with the Secretary of State to sort of stay in active status. That
Sure.
doesn't give you a ton of information, but it will, sometimes reveal whether they're paying attention to that requirement. I didn't know that the 990s were so out of date. I wonder if there's some kind of embargo or whatever they would call it, or if they're just behind.
I think they're just behind. I suspect that's the case. At any rate, I didn't do a ton of research on that front, because I'm pretty diligent about looking for the most recent stuff. Couldn't find it, but it sounds like they might just be behind. That there might be a backlog, right?
You find yourself thinking this, Mike, 2019, if something hasn't happened since 2019, I think backlog. Pandemic threw something out of whack.
Yeah.
Not gotten back yet.
It's a trigger. Yeah, it's a
Right.
flag.
Right. If it hasn't been updated since 2015, I think, well, I wonder what the new rule is.
What happened?
Or if it's 2021, it's like a year back. I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe it just takes that long. But 2019, I think,
That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. I was gonna say that what was interesting is, I noticed the references to the NTEE, which which is not something I've ever heard of, but apparently, maybe it's because we were already in a conversation of taxonomies, that I even noticed this in the first place. I don't know, but there's a national taxonomy of exempt entities that the IRS applies. So the folks who are in charge of making the determination of whether or not the organization qualifies for exempt status applies these NTEE codes to the organization, so you can gather some data. So I was messing around with Excel before the call, because I wanted to gather some data. I think there may have been just too many lines. I'm not sure, but
Sure.
the kind of the cool thing is you can go to the IRS website, download an Excel file of all of a jurisdiction's nonprofits, and organize them, create a pivot table and of these codes, and you can get some kind of interesting data and some visualizations on what's going on in Minnesota, for example. I downloaded the Minnesota data and did a pivot table for the on these codes just to see who are the most active top 25 types of nonprofits in Minnesota, and it was interesting. So Christianity, I think the churches were the largest category. I guess not surprising, but in the top 25 were arts organizations, which was also in the group, and
I'm sure I feel like animal service nonprofits are huge these days.
Yeah, they could be. I didn't. As I said, it was my computer crashed before we were able to even start that. So I didn't get a super deep look at it, but.
So Mike, would you say these are like the nonprofit corollary to an SIC or NAIC code?
I think that's right. I think that you could apply still, and I don't know. I mean, if the SIC codes would still be attributable to a nonprofit, I don't know. I don't know if
no, I don't think that they use SIC codes for nonprofits.
Yeah,
this is super interesting, Mike. It just goes to show there's something for every industry. Right. So then you get those major groupings. Yeah.
Yeah. So religion affiliate, I saw a lot of X's, a lot of A's in there: arts, culture, and humanities. Fewer B's, and now if you count those by income or revenue, it'd be a different sort, of course.
Sure.
I mean, healthcare would probably be up there.
Yeah.
But that the file that you can download includes the employee ID numbers, which
right.
are nice to have. In some cases, it includes the revenue, it includes their determination date. So a lot of good data from that.
Absolutely.
And I can't remember. I think I downloaded like 38,000 rows from Minnesota, and just looked around for all the nonprofits that I'm directly related to were available there. It was public data, kind of fun to mess around with. And
well, this would be great too if you're considering representing a nonprofit, to be able to just check some of those numbers and determine whether they'll pay your bill or not. So
yeah, that's right. And I think because looking at the currency of the information, I thought it was more current. You have like a 2022 available download. So I thought, well, that's cool, because I was not seeing that obviously in the most recent 990s. So it might be more available, more recent data in some of those downloads.
Sure. Well, that's great. I'm gonna alert my staff to that in case we get those kinds of questions.
I don't know who's ever searching by the NTEE.
Never heard it.
Yeah, you can't doubt it. Essentially, you have to create your own database for this kind of thing. A nonprofit search is pretty easy on GuideStar or the IRS website to find a specific nonprofit or a foundation is not difficult. I mean, that's Google or Secretary of State or whatever. That's not super difficult, but the data was kind of fun to see.
Well, sure, you might want to see where they sit in relationship to other nonprofits doing the same kind of work, and this would clearly be a way to get there.
Yeah. There's not, and the other tricky part was just like who's donating to these organizations, what's the source of their revenue, and that's not that. I think some of the foundations and obviously the nonprofits will celebrate their major donors, so that's, but if it's I don't know, what's the word? These aren't political action committees.
Right, exactly.
So typically, typically the donors are celebrated, not hidden.
Yeah,
But there is no good way that I'm aware of to find out who the donors might be to particular.
right. And you can be an anonymous donor to a nonprofit, so.
Yeah.
In a way that's more questionable when donating to a political action committee, so. Yeah, well, that's great. Good info, Mike.
Those were my interesting ones. I did stumble across a claim this week that I was completely unfamiliar with. I don't know how. I'm sure this is one of those ones where I'm sure that there was I read the case in law school probably, or actually I think the claim is older than I think the claim is newer than my law school experience. But you think I would have stumbled across it at some point, a Blasius claim or the Unical standard. Are you familiar with that one?
No, you mentioned it in an email. I'm like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, Delaware Chancery Court, the standard for reviewing like in a hostile takeover, for example, if you try to defend against that, in addition to just the regular business judgment rule, there's a standard that the Delaware courts apply to the appropriateness of those defensive measures. I don't know how I've never stumbled across it before. It was funny because it was brought to me from somebody who's building a new AI legal research tool, and that was their sample question. So that was a trigger for me that this is like a common question, right? Like, what's the statute of limitations for a particular claim?
Right.
What are the elements for a breach of, I can't remember what the question was exactly, but the Blasius, I'm like, oh, that's something I should know, but I don't know, right?
It's the great thing about being a researcher. You don't actually have to know anything. You just have to be able to find it.
Right. So yeah, but that's it. Yeah, this thing is like how much I don't know. You don't know what you don't know, and it's part of the thrill of this position, I guess.
Right, keeps us humble. Yeah, for sure.
Before we wrap, Karen, any news items that caught your attention this week in the world of legal? Or the world of
news items? Gosh, I thought you were going to ask me about my upcoming week, so I'm totally thinking well, of course, the big news item here in Hennepin County is the U.S. Supreme Court came out yesterday, and the county lost in that Haking's case about tax forfeited property. So it's exciting news in kind of a negative way that I don't think the county's involved in many Supreme Court cases. So I don't think anyone is surprised at the result, especially after how the oral argument went. But it was a unanimous decision by the court.
Yeah.
So we do have some folks from the Hennepin County Attorney's Office who are going to do a CLE for us in July about folks who worked on that case and about that experience going to the Supreme Court. So that'll be fun to get their perspective. And then there'll also be some discussion about moving forward and what that means for how the county will have to change how they do this. So that was a news report that caught my eye.
I'd love to attend that. It's using real world consequences, as it turns out. Is it? Yeah.
Oh yeah. But other states, do it differently. I'm sure the county is well aware of other approaches that they can implement. But implementation is always right. That where the devil is in the details. So
that's good to see. It's good to see decisions not coming down only on ideological.
Right.
I was reading the Warhol decision this week. Roberts and Kagan dissenting is just, I don't know, these days just seems shocking to me.
Right, when
you
you
know.
get those, like, I don't know, they're not exactly alliances, but when things fall in different ways, it gives you a
Yeah,
little bit of hope that there's some independence left
yeah.
in the judiciary, yeah.
No,
What
it's
did anything, legal research oriented catch your eye? In historically, in, vendor announcements for legal research enhancements used to come in July at the American Association of Law Libraries annual meeting. We'll see if there are any big announcements coming up in a month or so, but
yeah, I was this you know what's interesting is this news source called Semaphore. I noticed that this article came out on the 24th, a day before Robert Ambrogi posted the same news on his website, which to
really,
me was unusual, right? I mean, usually I feel like Bob Ambrogi is breaking that news, and this article came out a day before. I saw his
oh,
article and I thought, wait a minute, don't I know this already? And I
yeah,
did,
I read
because I got the
this.
newsletter from Semaphore, which was interesting.
Yeah,
Um, just another AI story, which is uh,
it's
getting
the
tired.
flavor of the day, yep.
Yeah, flavor of the day. Interesting. So your week, Karen. Sorry, have we?
No worries, there's really, it'll be a short week next week.
Yeah,
I was commenting before we started recording, there doesn't seem to be a huge number of folks downtown today. People starting their weekend a little early.
yeah.
Next Thursday is the Hennepin County Law Library's annual meeting of the Board of Trustees. So
Oh,
they approve the budget. We do a little annual report. So that'll be nice. That's a
interesting.
statutory
Yeah,
requirement. So
yeah. What's that? What's the vibe of that meeting? Is that totally professional? Is that what's the is that a
you
fun
know,
event? Do you look forward to that kind of thing, or is that an
no, I
administrative?
really don't love that. That doesn't play my strengths. But with me there, it's probably less formal than it used to be. But we have 3 district court judges on the board and 1 member of the County Board of Commissioners, and then a couple of attorneys in practice. And so it's a great mix of perspectives. I guess we have 3 attorneys in practice on the board too. So we have a 7-member board. So in our current configuration, we have 1 member from a fairly large law firm, an executive director of a local legal nonprofit, and then just a solo attorney. So the attorney perspective is really varied, and it's usually a pretty interesting, just sort of feel good meeting. Nothing controversial tends to arise,
Yeah,
but
yeah. I
so
was
it'll
like,
be good.
what's going on in the background in this area. So,
Yeah.
uh,
So and then I'm starting to teach next week at
oh yes, I've
St.
heard a lot
Thomas Law
about.
School. I'm teaching a
Yeah,
Minnesota legal research class. So I may get some good questions from my students to bring up in the
yeah.
coming
That
weeks.
that sounds great. It's funny. I've heard a lot about your Minnesota legal research class recently. Is that people are excited about it? Interestingly, I mean, we know the same academics, I guess, but yeah,
Yeah,
that should be good. We'll introduce folks to what Piercing and Donnell's and
yeah. Some of
uh,
the
I
local
should.
titles that their
Yeah,
attorneys they work for are going to refer to. So should
yeah,
be, yeah.
yeah. I should probably audit your class. And
Yeah, be
mm,
careful if you audit it, you'll be pressed into co-teaching it. So,
yeah.
do you have anything exciting coming up, Mike?
No. What do we have? I am no, I'm always excited about something. We are looking to do the next CLE, still open to do that. I was thinking about doing another law and literature Semaphore. The founder of this, one of the CEO of this publication, it turns out, just wrote a book called Traffic. which I just put two and two together like yesterday. I discovered the text a little while ago. It's called Traffic. It's the history of journalism by Ben Smith, who was one of the co-founders of BuzzFeed, and talks about how the impact of going after clicks and traffic impacted journalistic enterprise, and that we might be seeing a more fractured internet. And it's interesting that as you can see, this is a very news, more traditional news type of publication. It sells advertising. So it's kind of interesting to see, the talks about how after the pandemic and right wing, the rise of the right wing resulted in increased subscriptions to New York Times and traditional journalism.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So all of that, I picked up the text because I'd heard about this new fractured internet, and because the internet has so much of an impact on how we think, how we should be conducting research, and that we're going back to this old. I was interested in what he had to say about this new fractured internet, so I thought maybe a new law and literature CLE on this text, Traffic by Ben Smith. Still working my way through the text. I have to say I'm not in love with the text. It's not poorly written or poorly reported, I don't think, but I just I don't care who was at the launch party or what kind of car they drove, and I don't know. I'm struggling with it's just a personal style thing, I think, more than it is a journalistic thing. But I don't know.
It's super interesting, though, as you say, from a research perspective, because the traditional sources that we would rely on are New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, locally, our local newspapers, like the Star Tribune, Pioneer Press. But then, do we start including these online news sources like MinnPost or Minnesota Reformer, or I just don't. And then you can drill down. I know lawyers do a lot of research in social media, but not for news, really, more for evidence.
Yeah,
I think insurance company attorneys spend a lot of time on social media trying to figure out what people are really doing as opposed to what they're saying they're doing. But
and I think that's the legal research end of the CLE, probably, right? It's what is a trusted source, and how is that need to go after traffic impacted the trustworthiness of the resources and things like that. So I think it would be a fun law and literature. I'll probably come around to it. It could just be the voice of the author that's triggering me.
Right. Well, or maybe there's another source about that would be better.
For sure. We did that last time. We did a couple of texts, actually. We did we did a case in addition, that relevant case that sort of helped inform the conversation on corporations as well. But super, it's a very interesting topic, and that's what I'm excited to finish the text and maybe put together that CLE next week.
Oh, that sounds great, Mike. Yep.
Okay, that's we're near the top of the hour. Karen, thanks for going over time and dealing with my technical issues this morning.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Have a great long weekend, everyone.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.